Kia ora koutou. I'm Mel Wilson, and for those who don't know me, I've been attending Northpoint for about 11 years now, along with my husband Jared. He just told me that he chose the seat in the corner there because it is the most comfortable seat to have a sleep in if my sermon is boring. So please keep an eye on him and make sure he stays awake. We have 4 amazing daughters, Annabelle, Emily, Kate and Olivia. And today's topic of justice is something that comes up a bit when you have 4 girls in the house. So I currently work as a policy analyst for the New Zealand Council of Christian Social Services, an organisation that carries out advocacy on behalf of the social service organisations associated with 6 denominations, including the Baptist Church. Essentially, we work for a just and compassionate New Zealand, or Aotearoa, by raising understanding of how changes to laws and policies will impact the people that our social services work alongside. So we engage with government across a range of areas related to justice and the impacts of injustice in our society. I love my work because, first of all, I really love expressions of different denominations, the church working together. And secondly, because the area of justice and how this relates to our faith is something that I've been really interested in since I was in my late teens. And this interest was further sparked by being involved in ministries like a soup kitchen when I was at university, and then moving to Vancouver, where I was confronted with the very visible issue of homelessness there. So today I'll be continuing our series on the Beatitudes, focusing on the topic of justice. To begin with, I thought that I'd continue on the theme of chocolate from our celebrations and use this to demonstrate an issue of justice in our society. So could I please have 10 volunteers up to the stage? I'm not going to get you to do anything crazy, but if you like chocolate, that would be a bonus. So just 10 people, if you could come and stand along the front here. All right, and Emily, can you come up, please? All right, so if you want to stand, maybe along this step here so that you're right across the front of the stage. Maybe just down a little bit further. And Linda, do you want to come down this end? That would be great. Yeah, so I only need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so I've got 12, so I might need 2 people to pop down, I'm afraid. We just need 10. Oh, sorry guys. Oh, you can still join, it's all right, come back. I can... All right, cool. All right, so we've got 10 people here, and Emily, could you give everybody a chocolate bar? So I want you to imagine that these 10 people represent all of the households in New Zealand, and these 10 chocolate bars represent all of the wealth in New Zealand. So... everybody has 1 chocolate bar. So essentially this is what it looks like if all of the money in our country is split evenly between everybody. But we know that this is not how it works, right? So we're going to split you down the middle here, and we'll just get you guys to shuffle this way. So let's imagine that these guys here represent the wealthiest half of households in New Zealand, and these guys the least wealthy household. So now, Emily, what we need to do here is we need to take 4 of the chocolate bars from this group and give them to this group, please. Now, don't worry, you'll all leave with chocolate, so please don't cry. All right, so these guys represent our wealthiest 50% of households, and they get 93% of the wealth in New Zealand. So they've almost got 2 chocolate bars each, which is pretty nice, right? How do you feel about that, Paul? Right. All right. So now, Paul, I might get you to come and stand up here. Yep. So Paul represents the wealthiest 10% of households in New Zealand. Yeah. So what we're going to do, Emily, is that we need to give Paul 5 chocolate bars. So we're going to take 4 off these guys here. So he's got 5. Have you got 5 there? Yep, awesome. So he's got 5, these guys have got 4, and these guys get to share 1 chocolate bar. So how do you feel about that, Annabelle? Not sure, eh? Not sure how that feels. All right. So now if we take this scenario and look globally, we're going to give Paul another 2 chocolate bars. So in actual fact, Paul's done very well here. He represents the wealthiest 10% of people worldwide, and he actually gets 7.5 chocolate bars, but I couldn't be bothered breaking them up on stage here. So imagine he's got 7.5 chocolate bars. And actually, this 50% here, they don't actually get 1 chocolate bar. They get 1/5 of a chocolate bar to share between them. So Kate, what do you think about that? Doesn't feel very fair, does it? All right. So Em, do you want to give everyone back a chocolate bar? So it's actually just quite surprising and confronting, isn't it, when we get a picture of what one issue of justice, so how wealth is shared, actually looks in our world. So hey, thank you everyone for volunteering. Please take your wealth and go and enjoy it. And I'm just going to invite Annabelle to come and read our passage for today. Is this one good to go? Cool. Do you want to stand here? And then no, it's on. Yeah. Just stand. Yeah.
Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him. He began to teach them. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will show mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you."
Thanks. Cool. So I'm just going to pray before we begin exploring this passage today. So Lord, thank you that we get to gather together today in worship and in celebration. Please help us to grow in our understanding of our relationship with you and others as Christ followers as we explore the word today. Amen. So our focus today is on verse 6. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. With this verse, the Beatitudes shifts from a description of the blessing that exists in God's kingdom for those who may be considered the downtrodden, the least, or the lowly, those who are poor in spirit, those who mourn, those who are meek, towards more of a focus on action, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, those who act mercifully, those who act as peacemakers. And as we consider what this verse means for us, we're going to look at 2 aspects of it. Firstly, what is meant by righteousness, and secondly, what it means to hunger and thirst for something. So firstly, if we look at the term righteousness, the Greek word that has been translated here is a word called dikaiosune. In Greek, this word represents both righteousness and justice. English versions of the Bible typically just have one of these words, so we often read righteousness, but some translations, like the NLT, use the word justice. Dikaiosune is a word that appears 92 times in the New Testament, and it's used to describe, firstly, God's righteousness, so God's divine nature and character. We follow a righteous God who is the ultimate example of justice. Secondly, the reconciliation with him that has been made possible through Jesus' death on the cross. And then thirdly, Dikaiosune also relates to the right living or the right relationship that we seek to have with others as followers of Jesus. This concept of Dikaiosune is grounded in the idea of covenant and relationship. God creates the world and humans and establishes a right order to it all. Despite sin entering the world, God continues to uphold this covenant, remaining faithful to his people and drawing them back, reminding them of the right living that we've been called to as people of the covenant. His righteousness is evident in the ultimate act of righteousness, which is Jesus fulfilling the covenant and dying on the cross and restoring the right relationship between people and God. Our right relationship with God is central to what Jesus is talking about when he talks of hungering and thirsting for righteousness. Dikaiosune also extends to include the way we then live as a result of this relationship. It doesn't simply relate to us receiving salvation, but how we continue to seek relationship with God in our day-to-day lives. It reflects the idea that our right relationship with God cannot be in isolation of seeking right relationship with others and the human flourishing that God intended. It upholds the covenantal living that God intended for his people and the role that we play as people of God in seeking the restoration of his kingdom. One person, Daniel Philpott, describes the fruit of divine justice is human justice. So the Bible describes how we live out human justice or right relationship with others in a variety of ways: forgiveness, living generously, practicing hospitality, showing mercy. This is echoed in Matthew 25:40, where Jesus says, "And the king will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me.'" In the Old Testament, we see examples of how God instructed human justice. He rescued his people when they were oppressed under Pharaoh and instructed them to live in ways that did not oppress other people. He provided his people with commands that would uphold fairness and mercy in society so that those who were in need were cared for and were not disadvantaged economically. These laws protected people from scenarios like we've just seen with the chocolate example, where, for example, half the world's population share just 2% of the wealth. We can see from these examples that this inequality is now something that we accept as being normal. The year of Jubilee, in contrast, is one example of how God instructed justice, and this was a revolutionary concept economically, which required land to be returned to its original owners and broke cycles of poverty. So we can understand this verse to mean, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for right relationship with God and with others, for they will be filled." And now if we look at what is meant to hunger and thirst, we can view this in three ways. Firstly, this hunger and thirst can be understood as a metaphorical hunger and thirst that reflects our desire or our longing to be in right relationship with God. Secondly, it can reflect our need for God. Hunger and thirst represent eating and drinking, and these are essential for our well-being and survival. Our need for God is a basic aspect of our humanity. And thirdly, hunger and thirst can represent the longing we have for God's kingdom. Although we've been made acceptable to God through Jesus, our hearts and lives continue to carry the impacts of sin. So too, our world continues to reflect the impacts of this sin and injustice and is far from the Eden that God intended. We hunger and thirst for the kingdom, and while we can see glimpses of it, we cannot fully experience it. This is reflected in 2 Peter 3:13. We await a new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness or justice or dikaiosune dwells. The good news is that Jesus says those who hunger and thirst for righteousness will be filled or satisfied. Our real sense of satisfaction will not come through earthly things, but through being in right relationship with God and others. So this verse affirms that there's a role for us as the church in responding to the injustice that we see around us, to being people who act justly, who are merciful, who are generous, who are hospitable, who care for the poor, those who are oppressed, and those who are marginalised. Different churches acknowledge this justice role with different language. The Anglican Church, for example, describes transforming unjust structures of society and challenging violence of every kind and pursuing peace and reconciliation. The Salvation Army talks about existing to pursue justice and righteousness of God that values and includes all people. And this includes the challenging of evil, injustice, and oppression, and calling for steps aimed at their elimination. And as Baptists, we acknowledge that the Baptist vision of mission extends beyond the redemption of individuals to the renewal of social structures. For Baptists, mission means preaching the gospel of Christ's kingdom, both to lost sinners and fallen systems. So we're going to break now for a song, and when we return, we're going to explore some of the ways that we can engage in issues of justice in New Zealand. So we're going to continue looking at this passage. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. And looking at some of the ways we can engage in issues of justice in our world. So central to the idea of justice or injustice is the concept of power. And as we saw with the chocolate exercise earlier, injustice suggests that there's a lack of fairness, an infringement of rights, an inequality, or an imbalance of power that results in someone or a group of people being disadvantaged. One definition of power that I find to be really helpful is that power can be defined as the ability to influence and make decisions that impact other people. So if we want to explore how we can engage in issues of justice, it can be really useful for us to consider what types of power we hold and where we have the ability to influence and make decisions that impact other people in a way that reflects a right relationship with God and with others. So here are some of the examples of areas where we can hold power. So we have the ability to influence or make decisions that impact others socially. And this might look like finding ways to include people who are typically socially excluded. So in the workplace, or if you're a kid at school, this might look like inviting a new kid into your group of friends or supporting someone who's being bullied. We have the ability to influence and make decisions that impact others with our time. This might look like seeking out ways to volunteer our time in spaces that are addressing issues of justice or supporting people impacted by injustice. We have the ability to influence or make decisions that impact others spiritually. What are the issues of justice that we could be praying for, either individually or together? We're going to look now at one example which Christians have engaged in here in New Zealand, and that is the issue of modern slavery. Modern slavery is a term used to describe people being forced into work for a range of reasons, including child labour and human trafficking. Modern slavery affects how safe people are in their work and whether they're treated fairly. According to World Vision, 50 million people worldwide, of which 12 million are children, are estimated to be in slavery. As part of their work in this area, World Vision have produced a risky goods guide, which looks at the products that we import and their relationship to modern slavery. Their research found that 86% of the total garments, so clothing items, and 62% of the coffee imported to New Zealand in 2022 were considered risky goods. They also found that households in New Zealand spend $77 every week on goods associated with modern slavery. So because of their concern about this issue, World Vision worked alongside Trade Aid to encourage New Zealand to adopt legislation or laws to address modern slavery. So in New Zealand, we have laws that make slavery a crime within New Zealand, but the purpose of the laws, the modern slavery law that these groups were advocating for, was primarily to help ensure that the products we import and use in New Zealand and the supply chains associated with products sold or made here are not associated with forms of slavery. So World Vision and Trade Aid used one of the tools that we have available to us to use in New Zealand, the petitions process, to urge the government to put these laws in place. A petition is a request to Parliament asking them to take a certain action, such as creating or changing a law or a policy. Now, anyone can start a petition. You don't have to be old enough to vote, and you don't have to have New Zealand citizenship. You can present a petition as an individual, or you can ask other people to sign your petition to show that there is support for what you're asking for. In the case of World Vision and Trade Aid's petition, which was the Take Action Against Modern Slavery petition, 37,000 people signed this petition. And when it was presented to the Petitions Committee, they agreed that the government should take action on this issue. This led to the government enabling the public to have a say on whether this law was needed and what it should look like. This resulted in over 5,000 people making submissions or writing to the government to say we support this law. And in August 2023, the government committed to putting this law in place. So this is an example of how we can use our power together to influence in the political space what happens to other people in our world. Unfortunately, this year, the government has put a pause on this legislation because it's not considered a current priority. So where do we go from here? Do we just accept that this won't go ahead? What are some of the ways that we can engage in this issue if we feel passionately about it? One of the areas that we can keep this issue at the fore is with ongoing advocacy. So we can use the tools that we have through our government systems to keep this issue at the front. This can look like writing to MPs or to our local MP or other MPs that may have been involved in this process. It can look like contacting the Leadership Advisory Group who was set up by the government to help form this law. By doing this, we show that this issue is still important in our country and there's still demand for this law to go ahead. Other ways that we can be involved in this is being informed about where we spend our money. So there's quite a few tools to help with this, and one example is an ethical fashion guide that Baptist World Aid in Australia have produced, which has been around for a number of years, and it rates different companies and identifies those that are producing clothing items ethically. Another way that we can engage in this is by asking questions. When we buy things, we can ask about where the products are made. When we go and get our coffee from a cafe, we can ask if the beans have been ethically sourced. Another way we can engage is by raising awareness. So we can bring this topic up in conversation and find out if people know about it. We can find out if others are interested in it, and we can share what we know about the issue. We've also been in touch, Clayton's been in touch with World Vision, and they're looking at doing some more sort of collective work around this issue, so we can continue to keep informed about that and engage in that if it's something that is of interest. I just wanted to make a few final points about the issue of justice. So issues of justice can easily become politicised, but it's really important to note that regardless of our political persuasion or our views on what the best approach is to a particular issue, that we are all called as followers of Jesus to engage somehow. Theologian Rowan Williams argues that the Christian disciple does not campaign for political control, but for the ability to make the vision of a better way of ordering public life visible. And I really love that idea. We can be overwhelmed with the injustice in the world and feel like we can't engage in every issue, but there may be certain things we feel more strongly drawn to respond to. There may be things that the Holy Spirit places on your heart that you really feel you want to do something about. There are often no quick fixes to justice issues. We can look at William Wilberforce as an example of this. He led the movement in Britain to abolish slavery. He championed this issue for more than 40 years, along with many others in support, and he faced many setbacks in this time, but ultimately was successful. He actually died 3 days after the law was passed in Britain to abolish slavery. But this work that's being done now by World Vision and Trade Aid and others is a continuation of his efforts to keep this issue at the forefront and to keep having a voice about it. The kingdom of God has been described as subversive. We have power as individuals, but we also have power collectively to impact the systems that we identify as being unjust. Change will not necessarily come through one powerful leader, but through the seemingly small actions we take to continue to keep these issues at the forefront. So as we finish, I'd like to give you some time to reflect on a few questions. Firstly, what is an area that you would like to see justice in? Secondly, where are there opportunities for you to influence in relation to these issues? And lastly, what does it look like for us to hunger and thirst for righteousness and justice as the church here in Taranaki? So as we close, if there are issues of justice that you would like to know more about, please get in touch. I'm always keen to chat about these things, and I'm really happy to share what I know about what is happening in relation to different issues in New Zealand. So we'll just leave these questions with you now to reflect on.